By the late 19th century, the British Empire had consolidated its control over large parts of southern Africa, including the Kingdom of Zululand. The Anglo-Zulu War of 1879 marked the beginning of the British effort to dismantle Zulu political and military power. Although the Zulu initially achieved a famous victory at the Battle of Nkandla, they were ultimately defeated. The Zulu people, who had once been a powerful and independent nation under leaders like Shaka Zulu, found themselves subjected to British colonial rule. This period saw significant land dispossession and economic hardship for the Zulu people, as the British seized fertile lands for European settlers and imposed European-style governance on African societies. A few years later, following the Second Anglo-Boer War, the British government sought to extract greater revenue from African communities, both to cover the costs of the war and to fund the administration of the colony. The British implemented a poll tax in 1905, designed to force Africans into wage labour by making it difficult for them to subsist off the land alone. This poll tax, in addition to existing hut taxes, led to increased resentment and tension. Many Zulu men were already struggling under the burden of previous taxes and the loss of their lands, and the new poll tax exacerbated their suffering. Chief Bambatha kaMancinza of the Zondi clan emerged as the leader of the Zulu Rebellion. He represented a faction of Zulu chiefs and commoners who refused to accept the colonial government's oppressive measures. Bambatha took up arms in opposition to the colonial regime, vowing to resist the tax through violent means if necessary. In February 1906, a group of Zulus led by Bambatha attacked a government convoy that was enforcing tax collection. This resulted in the deaths of many Europeans in the convoy. The few survivors fled. The rebellion had begun. In response, the British declared martial law and mobilized colonial troops. The colonial administration viewed the rebellion as a threat to the stability of the region and moved swiftly to crush it. The Zulu were poorly armed compared to the British forces, who had access to modern rifles, artillery, and other advanced military equipment. The colonial forces were well trained and had the advantage of superior firepower, including the notorious Maxim guns, which could fire hundreds of rounds per minute. Despite these disadvantages, Bambatha and his followers put up a determined resistance. Bambatha and his supporters sought refuge in the dense Nkandla Forest, which became a key strategic location for the Zulu rebels. The Zulus had acquired some rifles by this point in history, but still mainly relied on the shield and spear. Throughout May 1906, a series of skirmishes took place in and around Nkandla Forest. The British, led by Colonel Duncan McKenzie, launched several expeditions into the forest to root out the rebels. The thick vegetation and the difficult terrain gave the Zulu fighters a tactical advantage, enabling them to evade capture. Bambatha's leadership and knowledge of the local geography enabled the rebels to sustain the fight for several months, though they were continually pursued by British forces. Although the Zulu forces were initially able to hold off the British troops, over time they eventually suffered significant losses due to their inferior firepower. By the end of May, the British began to close in on Bambatha and his forces. They had forced the rebels into a defensive position in the Mome Gorge, setting the stage for the final and decisive battle of the rebellion. The Zulu forces, however, believed the gorge was defensible due to its steep and rugged terrain, and they planned to make a final stand there. On the morning of June 10, 1906, the British launched a coordinated and overwhelming assault on the Zulu positions. They used a methodical approach, surrounding the gorge to cut off any potential escape routes. The plan was to force the rebels into a confrontation in an area where British firepower could be most effective. The colonial forces, numbering around 4,000 men, included regular British troops, local militia, and African auxiliaries loyal to the colonial government. These forces were well armed with modern weaponry, including maxi machine guns and artillery.
Troop, unlimber!
The British forces initiated the attack with a bombardment of the gorge. They used artillery and machine guns to shell the Zulu positions, which were nestled in the thick bush and rugged slopes.
All right then. Nobody told you to stop working.
The heavy firepower inflicted severe casualties on the Zulu forces, who were unable to mount an effective counterattack due to their limited weaponry. As the British troops advanced, they encircled the Zulu fighters, preventing any possible escape. The rebels, though vastly outgunned, fought bravely, attempting to defend their position using the cover of the terrain. However, the combination of sustained artillery fire, machine guns, and the disciplined British infantry assault proved overwhelming. The battle resulted in a one-sided defeat for the Zulu rebels. Estimates suggest that between 500 and 600 Zulu warriors were killed in the confrontation. Bambatha himself was reportedly killed during the battle, though there were later rumors and claims that he may have escaped the battlefield and gone into hiding. On the colonial forces side, the casualties were far smaller. Perhaps a dozen men were killed. The Battle of Mome Gorge marked the end of the Bambatha Rebellion. With their leader dead or missing and their forces decimated, the remaining rebels either surrendered or were captured by the British forces in the days that followed. Colonial authorities also imposed severe economic and political punishments on the Zulu population. Villages suspected of harboring rebels were burned, and large tracts of land were confiscated from those deemed to have supported the uprising. The rebellion resulted in between 3,000 to 4,000 Zulu deaths, and thousands more were displaced or arrested. The crushing of the rebellion further consolidated British control over Zululand and the broader Natal region. While the British military and colonial administration claimed victory, the rebellion left a lasting scar on Zulu society and intensified anti-colonial sentiment. The Battle of Mome Gorge is remembered as a tragic and decisive moment in Zulu history. Though the rebellion was ultimately unsuccessful, it has come to symbolize the resistance of the Zulu people against colonial oppression and economic exploitation. Chief Bambatha, in particular, became an enduring symbol of defiance, and his legacy lived on as a figure of African resistance against colonialism.